Who really was Cain's wife? It is one of the most haunting questions in the Bible. Cain, the son of Adam and Eve, the firstborn of humanity, the man who shed his own brother's blood and became the world's first murderer. After Abel's death, Cain was cursed and banished to wander the earth. And yet, the scriptures quietly tell us something strange. Cain knew his wife, and she bore a son. Wait, his wife? Where did she come from? At this point in the story, the Bible only mentions Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, no one else. So who was this mysterious woman Cain married in the land of Nod? And then another whisper, hidden between the lines of Genesis. Adam and Eve didn't only have sons, they also had daughters. Daughters whose names we are never told. Daughters whose existence is only hinted at, like shadows moving just beyond the edge of the story. Why are they so forgotten? Why does the Bible keep their presence so subtle, almost hidden? And could one of these mysterious daughters have been the wife Cain took? This is not just a riddle of genealogy. This is a puzzle that stretches into ancient history, Jewish tradition, and the very foundations of humanity itself. Tonight, we peel back the veil on one of the Bible's greatest mysteries, the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve, and the woman who became the wife of Cain. But before we dive into the shadows of this mystery, I want to invite you to subscribe to The Bible and Reflection, because here we don't just read the Bible, we uncover its secrets and reflect on the hidden truths that still echo today. And if this mystery already has your curiosity burning, hit the like button right now so that more people can discover this forgotten story. In the beginning, the world was new. The soil was fresh, the rivers untamed, the sky wide and unbroken. And into this silence came Adam and Eve, banished from Eden, yet still chosen as the parents of the human race. We know their first sons by name, Cain and Abel, the farmer and the shepherd, one driven by toil, the other guided by gentleness, one whose heart grew bitter, the other whose offering found favor. And we know how their story ended, in jealousy, in blood, in the cry of a brother's voice rising from the ground. But what about the others? Because Adam and Eve did not only have two sons, the Bible itself whispers another truth. Genesis 5:4 tells us that Adam had other sons and daughters, not just one or two, but many, born across centuries of life. These daughters are the silent figures of Scripture. They are rarely named, rarely described, but they were there. They walked in the shadows of the first story, playing a role far more vital than most realize. For without these daughters, the story of humanity could not continue. They were the ones who became wives to their brothers, mothers to the next generations, carriers of the line that would stretch from Eden to Noah, from Noah to Abraham, and from Abraham to us. And yet, they are almost invisible. Why? Perhaps because the writers of Genesis focused on the great turning points, the fall, the murder, the flood. Perhaps because ancient records were written in a world that traced lineage through men, not women. Or perhaps their silence is meant to stir our curiosity, to remind us that behind the names we remember stand countless forgotten figures who made survival possible.
When Cain killed Abel, the world seemed to shrink. Only 3 were left: Adam, Eve, and the cursed wanderer Cain. But that is only the surface. In the background, there were daughters, Eve's daughters, alive, growing, uncounted. And one of them would become Cain's wife. This is where the mystery begins. The first murder, the first exile, and then a wife. A nameless figure taken from among the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve. She steps into the story without introduction, without explanation, yet her role changes everything. Because through her, Cain's line does not end, it begins. Through her, humanity's story does not stop at bloodshed, but continues into the building of the first city. The Bible leaves her nameless, but she is not alone. She stands for all the unnamed daughters of Eve, the silent mothers who built the future with their wombs. And so the question lingers in the shadows of Genesis. Who were these daughters, and why does their story remain untold?
The Bible itself is sparse, giving us only a hint. Adam and Eve had sons and daughters. But how many? Who were they? And why are their stories missing from the pages of Scripture? Ancient Jewish tradition tried to fill the silence. The Book of Jubilees, an ancient text written centuries before Christ, names some of the daughters of Adam and Eve. It speaks of Awan, said to be Cain's twin sister, and Azura, who became the wife of Seth. Other writings claim that every son born to Eve was paired with a twin sister destined to become his wife. This may sound strange to us, even unsettling, but in the earliest days of humanity, survival itself required it. There was no other family, no other nation, no other people. The world was empty. If the race of man was to grow, brothers and sisters had to marry. It was not until later, when the world was filled with people, that God gave laws forbidding such unions. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing in the 1st century, confirmed this idea. He declared that Adam and Eve had many children, and that these sons married their sisters. In fact, Josephus says Adam and Eve had 33 sons and 23 daughters. Imagine that, 56 children born from the first pair. If that is true, then the world was not as empty as we sometimes picture it. By the time Cain killed Abel, Adam and Eve had likely lived for decades, perhaps even centuries. Their household may have already been growing into a small tribe. Sons and daughters would have scattered outward, spreading across the land. This gives us another layer to the story. When Cain was cursed to wander in the land of Nod, perhaps he did not walk into total emptiness. Perhaps he encountered his own kin, siblings, nieces and nephews, already spreading outward from Eden's shadow. And among them was the woman who became his wife. But what is most haunting is the silence of Scripture about these women. The daughters of Eve were as real as Cain and Abel, yet they remain nameless, forgotten by history, hidden in the shadows. Why? Some believe it is because the story of Genesis is not a modern biography. It is a selective narrative shaped to highlight key themes: sin, judgment, covenant, redemption. The forgotten daughters did not fit into the flow of that story, yet their existence was acknowledged in a whisper. Others suggest something deeper, that the silence itself is symbolic, that the daughters of Adam and Eve represent all the unseen builders of history. We know the names of kings and warriors, but not the names of countless women who bore children, raised families, and carried civilization on their backs. Their anonymity is not absence, it is a shadowed presence,
reminding us that history is not written only by those whose names are remembered. And so we circle back to Cain's wife. In Jewish tradition, she is called Awan. In some accounts, she is his twin. In others, merely a younger sister. Either way, she was one of the forgotten daughters of Eve. And through her, Cain's cursed line continued. Through her, he built the first city. Through her, the name of Cain was not erased, but carved into history. It is ironic, isn't it? The Bible tells us that Cain feared being killed by whoever found him, and yet the very people he feared, his brothers and sisters, were the ones who gave him a wife. The very family he fractured through murder was the family that made his survival possible. Cain's wife stands as a reminder of a truth buried in silence. Humanity's story depended on the forgotten daughters. Without them, there would be no wives, no children, no nations. They were the unseen thread that carried life from Eden to the generations beyond. And yet, Scripture keeps them nameless, shadows in the background, echoes of lives unrecorded. Perhaps this is intentional. Perhaps it is meant to humble us, to remind us that not all who shape history are remembered, that behind every great name is an army of the forgotten who carried the weight of the future. Cain's wife was one of them, nameless in Scripture, essential in history. A daughter of Eve, whose silence speaks louder than her words.
The story of Cain's wife is more than just a riddle of genealogy. It is a mirror into the mysteries of humanity's beginnings. We have seen that Adam and Eve had many sons and daughters, living for centuries, spreading life across the earth. Yet the Bible names only a few. The daughters remain in the shadows, forgotten by name, but not by purpose. They were the silent architects of the human race. Through them, life continued after Abel's death, after Cain's exile, after the first murder stained the world. Cain's wife, one of these daughters, stands at the center of this hidden network. Whether called Awan in Jewish tradition or nameless in Scripture, she ensured the survival of Cain's line. Through her womb, the line of humanity continued. Through her, the first city was built. Through her, the future of the human race unfolded. Her anonymity is striking. Why does the Bible leave her unnamed while giving such detail about Cain's crime? Perhaps it is intentional. Perhaps the story is not about her identity, but about her role. A reminder that life continues even in the shadows, that the unseen can shape the world. And the daughters of Adam and Eve are not just historical curiosities, they are symbols. They represent the countless forgotten women in history whose labor, love, and courage carried life forward. They remind us that God often works through what is hidden, through what seems insignificant, and through those whose names are never recorded. Cain's wife is also a symbol of mercy in the midst of judgment. Cain, marked and exiled, feared the end of his line. Yet God allowed him a wife, a companion, a means to continue the story. Through her, God's plan moved forward, not by erasing sin, but by creating hope in the shadows. So who were these daughters of Adam and Eve? They were mothers, sisters, companions, forgotten by name, remembered by impact. They were the bridge between judgment and life, between exile and civilization, between the shadows of the first family and the dawn of humanity's story. And what about Cain's wife? She was one of them, a figure lost to history, yet central to the survival of mankind.
She reminds us that even in silence, even in mystery, life finds a way to endure. That the greatest impact is not always measured by fame or recognition, but by the quiet work of carrying humanity forward. In the end, the question is not only who she was, but what her existence teaches us. It teaches us that God's plan often works through the unseen, that the forgotten daughters of Eve shaped the world, and that even in the darkest moments, life and continuity find a way. The first family, with all its sorrow and mystery, continues to speak to us across the ages, not just through the sons we remember, but through the daughters we rarely see, through the nameless women who bore life, who carried hope, and whose silent work ensured that humanity endured. Cain's wife and the forgotten daughters of Adam and Eve are the hidden threads of history, shadows that shaped the light of civilization. And in their story, we find a mysterious, quiet, yet powerful testament. Life persists, even when names are lost, even when history overlooks it, and even when the world seems broken. So, who was Cain's wife? The Bible does not tell us, but when we look closer, we see that she was one of Adam and Eve's forgotten daughters, one of the unseen architects of humanity. She was nameless, silent, yet essential. The daughters of Adam and Eve were not merely background figures, they were the first mothers of the human race. Their lives, their choices, their very existence ensured that humanity did not end with Cain's exile or Abel's death. They were the hidden threads of life, woven into the earliest chapters of history. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all, the power of the forgotten, the nameless, and the unseen. Sometimes it is in the shadows that the most important work is done. Sometimes it is in silence that life endures. If this story made you pause, wonder, or see the Bible in a new light, don't let the mystery end here. Hit like if you were fascinated by the hidden daughters of Adam and Eve. Subscribe to the Bible and Reflection so you never miss another dive into the forgotten corners of Scripture. And leave a comment below. What do you think about Cain's wife? Do you imagine her as a sister, a twin, or a completely mysterious figure? Some questions have no simple answers, but exploring them reminds us that the Bible is alive with secrets, shadows, and stories waiting to be uncovered. Because in the end, the unseen often shapes the world far more than the seen.